The letter fluttered to the floor, the words searing into my mind like a branding iron. Lydia, you have a sister. My mother-in-law's voice echoed hollowly as I stared at her in disbelief. Robert shifted uncomfortably beside me on the plush sofa. Greta, what are you talking about? She clasped her hands, her eyes downcast. I should have told you both sooner. Years ago, before we met, Robert. She trailed off, leaving the implication hanging heavily in the air. A sick feeling twisted in my gut as the truth dawned on me. Robert had a child from another relationship, a daughter he had never mentioned, a secret buried so deep that even I was oblivious. Who is she? I demanded, my voice trembling with a potent mix of shock and betrayal. Robert's Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard. Her name is Emma. She's 16 now. 16 years old. The realization slammed into me like a freight train. This girl had existed all this time, mere miles away from us, and we knew nothing about her. Greta reached out, her papery skin brushing my arm. I'm sorry, dear. We wanted to protect you from... I jerked away from her touch, anger flaring hot. Protect me? By lying all these years? Robert ran a hand through his tousled brown hair, agitation etched into his features. Lydia, please. Let me explain. But I had heard enough. Snatching my purse from the side table, I stormed out of the living room and into the hallway, the plush carpet muffling my hurried footsteps. Lydia, wait! Robert called after me, but I kept moving, yanking open the front door and bursting out onto the sun-drenched porch. The peaceful tree-lined street mocked me with its tranquility as I paced back and forth, drawing in deep, shuddering breaths. How could he have done this? After everything we'd been through together, building our life, our family. The crunch of gravel underfoot made me spin around. Robert stood at the edge of the driveway, hands shoved into his pockets, a muscle twitching in his jaw. Talk to me, he pleaded, his hazel eyes boring into mine. Don't shut me out, not now. I opened my mouth, a torrent of recriminations ready to spill forth, but then I caught a glimpse of the diamond solitaire on my left hand, sparkling in the sunlight. A reminder of the vows we had made, the life we had promised to share. Drawing a steadying breath, I met his gaze levelly. Then you'd better start explaining. All of it, Robert. No more lies, no more secrets. I deserve to know the truth. His shoulders sagged, and he nodded slowly. You're right. You do. I'll tell you everything, Lydia. I swear it. As I stood there, rooted on that very porch where we had welcomed our firstborn son into the world, I could feel the landscape of our lives shifting irrevocably. The solid ground was crumbling beneath my feet, and I had no choice but to wade into the unknown, seeking answers and bracing for the impact of long-buried secrets. The moving truck rumbled up the driveway, its bulky form casting a long shadow across the freshly paved asphalt. I watched from the living room window as the burly movers unloaded box after box, their grunts carrying through the glass pane. Are you sure about this, Greta? I asked, turning to face my mother-in-law. She stood in the middle of the room, surveying the space with a critical eye. Of course, dear. She patted my arm in a placating gesture. With Emma coming to live with us, you'll need all the help you can get. My jaw clenched at her condescending tone, as if I couldn't handle my own family affairs without her interference. The front door swung open, and Robert stepped inside, his brow furrowed. The movers are just about finished unloading Greta's things. Excellent, Greta declared, clasping her hands together. Now, where should we set up my bedroom? I opened my mouth to protest, but Robert cut me off with a pleading look. Mom, are you sure you don't want to reconsider staying in your own place? We've got plenty of room here, but... Nonsense, Greta scoffed, waving a dismissive hand. I'm not getting any younger, and with my health issues, it's best if I'm close by. You'll need me around, especially with a teenage girl in the house. A flicker of irritation crossed Robert's face, but he remained silent. I knew he was torn, caught between his loyalty to me and his sense of duty toward his mother. The sound of footsteps on the porch steps made us all turn. A tall, slender girl with long, dark hair stepped into the entryway, her gaze flitting nervously around the room. Emma, Robert said, his expression softening. Come on in, sweetheart. Greta rushed forward, enveloping the girl in a tight embrace. My dear granddaughter, welcome to your new home. Emma stiffened, her eyes finding mine over Greta's shoulder. I offered her a tentative smile, trying to convey a sense of warmth and reassurance. As Greta released her, Emma smoothed her hands over her jeans, her shoulders hunched inward. "Hi," she mumbled, her voice barely audible. "It's so wonderful to have you here," Greta gushed, taking Emma's hands in her own. "We're going to be one big, happy family." A knot formed in my stomach at her words. Happy family? With the way things were unfolding, that seemed like a distant dream. Robert cleared his throat, stepping forward to place a gentle hand on Emma's back. "Why don't I show you to your room? Get you settled in?" Emma nodded, relief flickering across her features as she followed him out of the living room and down the hallway. Greta watched them go, a self-satisfied smile playing on her lips. Then, as if sensing my gaze, she turned to face me, her expression hardening. "Don't worry, Lydia," she said, her voice taking on a steely edge. "I'll make sure everything runs smoothly around here. You can count on me." A shiver ran down my spine at the glint in her eyes. In that moment, I knew Greta's presence in our home was about more than just helping out. She had an agenda, one that threatened to upend the delicate balance I had so carefully cultivated. As I stood there, surrounded by the trappings of the life Robert and I had built together, a sense of dread washed over me. The battle lines were being drawn, and I would have to fight to protect everything I held dear. The days bled into weeks, and a tense undercurrent rippled through our household. Emma remained withdrawn, speaking only when spoken to, and retreating to her room at every opportunity. Greta, on the other hand, seemed to relish her new role as matriarch, inserting herself into every aspect of our lives. "Lydia, dear, have you thought about signing Emma up for extracurriculars?" she asked one morning over breakfast, her tone saccharine sweet. "A girl her age needs structure and activities to keep her grounded." I exchanged a glance with Robert, who shrugged almost imperceptibly. "I was going to discuss some options with her," I replied, keeping my voice level, "but I wanted to give her some time to adjust first." Greta tsked disapprovingly. "Well, don't wait too long. You know how teenagers can be, idle hands and all that." Emma hunched lower in her chair, her gaze fixed on her plate. My heart ached for her. This girl thrust into our lives with no say in the matter. Later that day, as I was folding laundry in the living room, Greta swept in, her footsteps purposeful. "I've been thinking," she announced without preamble. "Emma could use a feminine influence in her life, a strong role model to guide her." I paused, a shirt dangling from my hands as I eyed her warily. "I'm her mother now, Greta. I think I can handle that role just fine." She waved a dismissive hand. Of course. But you have to admit you're a bit unconventional, a modern woman focused on your career." Her gaze drifted pointedly to the nursing textbooks stacked on the end table. Anger flared hot in my chest, but I bit back a retort, reminding myself to choose my battles carefully. Greta seemed to sense my irritation, for she softened her tone. "I only want what's best for Emma," she said, resting a hand on my arm. "You understand that, don't you, dear?" Before I could respond, the sound of footsteps drew our attention. Emma hovered in the doorway, her expression unreadable. "Everything okay?" I asked, offering her a reassuring smile. She opened her mouth, then seemed to think better of it, shaking her head. "Never mind," she muttered, turning on her heel and retreating back down the hallway. Greta watched her go, a calculating look in her eyes. "Like I said, Lydia, she needs guidance, and I intend to provide it, whether you like it or not." A shiver ran down my spine at the thinly veiled threat in her words. In that moment I knew Greta wasn't just overstepping boundaries. She was deliberately driving a wedge between Emma and me, undermining my authority at every turn. As I stood there, clutching the crumpled shirt in my hands, a hard knot of determination formed in my gut. I wouldn't let Greta win, not without a fight. This was my family, my home, and I would do whatever it took to protect it. The sound of shattering glass jolted me awake. I sat bolt upright in bed, my heart pounding as I strained to make out the muffled voices drifting from downstairs. Robert stirred beside me, his brow furrowed. "What was that?" he mumbled groggily. I threw off the covers, adrenaline coursing through my veins. "Stay here," I whispered, sliding out of bed and grabbing my robe from the foot of the mattress. Creeping down the hallway, I could make out Greta's shrill tones, punctuated by Emma's sullen replies. As I reached the living room, the scene that unfolded made my blood run cold. Shards of broken ceramic littered the floor, the remnants of a once pristine vase. Emma stood in the center of the chaos, her shoulders hunched defensively as Greta loomed over her, fury etched into every line of her face. "You clumsy, foolish girl," Greta raged, jabbing a finger toward the shattered pieces. "Do you have any idea how much that cost? How precious it was to me?" Emma flinched, her gaze downcast. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean—" "Sorry?" Greta cut her off with a harsh laugh. "Sorry doesn't fix anything, does it?" Anger flared hot in my chest, and I surged forward, planting myself between them. "That's enough, Greta," I snapped, my voice laced with steel. "Leave her alone." Greta's eyes widened in outrage, her mouth working soundlessly for a moment before she found her voice. "How dare you take her side? This is exactly why she needs discipline, Lydia. You're far too soft on her." "She's a child," I shot back, my hands balling into fists at my sides. "And she made a mistake, one that doesn't warrant this kind of reaction." Greta opened her mouth, no doubt to unleash another tirade, but I held up a hand, cutting her off. "No, I'm done listening to you berate her, undermine me at every turn. This is my home, Greta, my family, and I won't have you treating Emma this way anymore." For a long, tense moment, we locked eyes, a silent battle of wills playing out between us. Then, with a derisive snort, Greta spun on her heel and stormed out of the room, her slippered feet slapping against the hardwood floors. Silence descended, thick and oppressive. I turned to face Emma, my anger melting into concern as I took in her pale, stricken expression. "Are you okay?" I asked gently, reaching out to touch her arm. She flinched away from my touch, her eyes glittering with unshed tears. "Why did you do that?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "You didn't have to defend me." My heart clenched at the raw vulnerability in her words. This poor girl, so accustomed to being cast aside, neglected, of course she wouldn't understand someone standing up for her. "Yes, I did," I said firmly, holding her gaze. "Emma, you're part of this family now, whether you believe it or not, and I'll always have your back, no matter what." A flicker of emotion crossed her features, there and gone in an instant. Then, with a jerky nod, she turned and fled the room, leaving me standing amid the shattered remains of Greta's precious vase. As I stared at the broken pieces, a grim sense of determination settled over me. This was just the beginning. Greta's true colors were starting to show, and I knew her actions would only escalate from here. But I was ready, prepared to fight for what was mine with every ounce of strength I possessed. The battle lines had been drawn, and there would be no turning back. The envelope sat innocuously on the kitchen counter, its contents promising to upend everything I thought I knew. With trembling fingers, I tore it open, my breath catching in my throat as I scanned the documents inside. Pages upon pages of financial records detailing Greta's assets and investments, all meticulously organized in her familiar looping script. At first glance, it seemed like a straightforward portfolio, the kind of paperwork one would expect from a widow managing her late husband's estate. But then I saw it, a series of notations and calculations, outlining what appeared to be a plan to liquidate her holdings and funnel the proceeds into a new trust, a trust with both her name and Robert's listed as beneficiaries. My hands went numb, the papers fluttering to the countertop as the full weight of Greta's machinations slammed into me. This wasn't just about asserting control over the household. She was positioning herself to take control of our finances, our future. The sound of footsteps made me whirl around. Emma hovered in the doorway, her brow furrowed as she took in my stricken expression. "What's wrong?" she asked hesitantly. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. How could I explain the depths of Greta's betrayal, the insidious way she had wormed her way into our lives under the guise of family? Scooping up the papers, I brushed past Emma and headed for the living room, my steps fueled by a simmering fury. Greta looked up from her knitting as I entered, her eyes narrowing at my thunderous expression. "Lydia, dear, whatever is the matter?" I flung the documents onto the coffee table, watching as they scattered across the polished surface. "This is the matter, Greta," I bit out, my voice trembling with barely contained rage. "Your little scheme to bleed us dry and take everything we've worked for." Comprehension dawned on her features, swiftly replaced by a mask of indignation. "How dare you accuse me of such things?" she blustered, rising to her feet. "I'm simply trying to secure my future, ensure I'm taken care of in my old age." "By stealing from your own son?" I shook my head in disgust. You're unbelievable, Greta. Utterly shameless. Her eyes flashed dangerously. Watch your tone with me, girl. You have no idea what I've sacrificed for this family. Sacrificed? The word tasted bitter on my tongue. All you've done is take, and manipulate and undermine everyone around you for your own selfish gain. Greta opened her mouth, no doubt to unleash another torrent of vitriol, but I held up a hand, cutting her off. Save it. I'm done listening to your lies. I turned on my heel, my heart pounding in my ears. This ends now, Greta. One way or another, it all ends. As I stalked away, leaving her sputtering in outrage behind me, a grim sense of determination settled over me. Greta had shown her true colors, and there was no going back. No more playing by her rules, no more letting her run roughshod over my life. It was time to fight back, to protect what was mine at all costs. The gloves were finally off, and I intended to emerge victorious, no matter how high the stakes. I paced the length of the living room, my footsteps muffled by the plush carpet as I waited for Robert to return home. The damning evidence of Greta's schemes lay strewn across the coffee table, a stark reminder of the battle lines that had been drawn. The sound of the front door opening made me whirl around. Robert stepped inside, his brow furrowing as he took in my tense posture. Lydia? What's going on? Without a word, I gestured toward the papers scattered across the table. He crossed the room, his frown deepening as he scanned the documents. These are Mom's financial records, he murmured, glancing up at me with a puzzled expression. Why are you looking at? His voice trailed off as realization dawned, his face paling. Oh, God, she's trying to take everything, isn't she? I nodded grimly. It's all right there, Robert. Her plan to liquidate her assets and set up a new trust with both of your names on it. He sank onto the couch, cradling his head in his hands. I can't believe she would do this. My own mother. Sympathy tugged at my heart, but I tamped it down, hardening my resolve. Believe it, I said, my voice steely. Greta has shown her true colors, and we can't afford to be blind to them any longer. Robert looked up, his eyes haunted. What are we going to do? I drew in a deep breath, steeling myself for the confrontation ahead. We're going to stop her once and for all. But I need you with me on this, Robert. No more wavering, no more divided loyalties. It's us against her now. He held my gaze for a long moment, conflict flickering across his features. Then, with a slow nod, he straightened his shoulders. You're right. I'm with you, Lydia. All the way. A sense of grim satisfaction washed over me. United, we stood a chance against Greta's machinations. Divided, she would surely tear us apart. Over the next few days, we strategized, poring over the financial documents and mapping out our counterattack. I knew we had to move swiftly before Greta could make her next move. Finally, the plan was in place. I took a deep breath, squaring my shoulders as I strode into the living room, where Greta sat knitting by the window. Greta, I said, my voice ringing with authority, we need to talk. She looked up, her eyes narrowing at my tone. About what, dear? About your little scheme to take over this household and everything we've worked for. I gestured toward the documents arrayed on the coffee table. The game is up, Greta. We know exactly what you've been plotting. For a moment she remained impassive, her expression carefully blank. Then, slowly, a sly smile curved her lips. Well, well, she purred, setting aside her knitting needles. I see you've been a busy little bee, haven't you? Robert stepped forward, his jaw set in a hard line. It's over, Mom. We're not going to let you manipulate us anymore. Greta's eyes flashed with contempt as she rose to her feet, drawing herself up to her full height. You ungrateful boy, she spat. After everything I've done for this family, you turn on me like this? I held up a hand, cutting off her tirade. Enough, Greta. We're done playing by your rules. From now on, things are going to be different around here, or you can pack your bags and leave. Her gaze shifted to me, her lip curling in a sneer. Is that a threat, Lydia? It's a promise, I shot back, holding her stare without flinching. The choice is yours, but make no mistake, I will protect what's mine, no matter what it takes. For a long, tense moment, we remained locked in a silent battle of wills. Then, with a derisive snort, Greta turned on her heel and swept from the room, her slippered feet slapping against the hardwood floors. As her footsteps faded, I exhaled a long, shuddering breath, the adrenaline ebbing from my veins. Robert stepped forward, wrapping his arms around me in a fierce embrace. Thank you, he murmured into my hair, for standing up for us, for our family. I leaned into his warmth, drawing strength from his solid presence. The war was far from over, but for now we had claimed a small victory, and I intended to savor it, because the real battle was still to come. The dining room table groaned under the weight of the lavish spread I had prepared, a feast fit for a celebration, though the atmosphere was anything but festive. Tension hung thick in the air as our extended family trickled in, casting furtive glances my way. Robert's Aunt Marjorie was the first to speak up, her brow furrowed in concern. "Lydia, dear, what's this all about? Your message sounded rather urgent." I exchanged a loaded glance with Robert, who gave me an imperceptible nod. Taking a steadying breath, I turned to face our assembled relatives. "Thank you all for coming," I began, my voice ringing with steely determination. "I know this was somewhat last minute, but there's an important matter we need to address as a family." Greta shifted in her seat, her eyes narrowing. "And what matter would that be exactly?" I met her challenging stare head-on, refusing to be cowed. "Your relentless attempts to undermine my authority in this household, and your underhanded schemes to take control of our finances for your own gain." A collective gasp rippled through the room as I laid out the evidence, the damning paperwork detailing Greta's meticulous plans. Shock and disbelief flickered across the faces of our relatives as the truth came to light. Greta, for her part, remained outwardly impassive, but I could see the fury simmering in her eyes, the muscle twitching in her jaw. "How dare you accuse me of such things?" she spat, rising to her feet and planting her hands on the table with a resounding thud. "I've only ever had this family's best interests at heart. By trying to bleed us dry?" I shot back, refusing to back down. "By manipulating and deceiving us at every turn? That's not love, Greta. That's greed, plain and simple." Her face contorted with rage, and for a moment I thought she might lunge across the table at me. But then a tremor ran through her frame and she seemed to deflate, sinking back into her chair. "You ungrateful, selfish girl," she hissed, her voice trembling with barely contained emotion. "After everything I've sacrificed." A heavy silence descended, broken only by the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. Our relatives shifted uncomfortably, their gazes darting between Greta and me, unsure of where to place their loyalties. Finally, Aunt Marjorie cleared her throat, her expression one of profound sadness. "Greta, is it true? Did you really do these things?" Greta's jaw worked soundlessly for a moment, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Then, with a jerky nod, she seemed to crumple in on herself, her shoulders slumping in defeat. She whispered, her voice barely audible, "It's all true." A collective exhalation swept through the room, as if everyone had been holding their breath. I felt a surge of vindication, tempered by an unexpected twinge of pity for the broken woman before me. Robert reached out, his hand finding mine and giving it a gentle squeeze. A silent show of support and solidarity, reminding me that we were in this together, united against the threat that had nearly torn our family apart. As the shock wore off and our relatives began to process the revelations, one by one, they turned to face Greta, their expressions ranging from disappointment to outright disgust. And in that moment, I knew the battle had been won. Greta's web of lies and manipulation had finally unraveled, leaving her exposed and powerless in the face of the family she had sought to control. It was a hollow victory, tinged with the bitter aftertaste of betrayal. But as I looked around the table at the faces of those I loved most, I knew it was a sacrifice worth making to protect what truly mattered. No matter the cost, I would always fight for my family. The gentle breeze carried the sweet scent of freshly turned earth as I knelt in the garden, my fingers sinking into the rich soil. Beside me, Emma crouched, carefully arranging a cluster of vibrant petunias in the raised bed we had constructed. "Like this, Mom?" she asked, glancing up at me with those wide, earnest eyes that still made my heart clench with a bittersweet pang. A year ago, I never could have imagined hearing those words from her lips. The simple endearment a reminder of how far we'd come, of the battles we'd fought, and the wounds we'd healed. "Perfect," I murmured, reaching out to tuck a stray strand of hair behind her ear. Her smile bloomed, radiant and unguarded, and in that moment, the weight of our shared past seemed to lift, if only for an instant. The crunch of footsteps on the patio drew my gaze upward. Robert approached, a tray laden with glasses of lemonade balanced in his hands. His expression softened as he took in the scene before him, and I felt a surge of love and gratitude for this man who had stood by my side through it all. "Thought you two could use a refreshment break," he said, setting the tray down and sinking onto the edge of the garden bed. Emma immediately reached for a glass, gulping down the tart liquid with unabashed enthusiasm. I chuckled, shaking my head in fond exasperation before claiming a glass of my own. As I sipped the cool beverage, my gaze drifted across the meticulously tended flower beds and neatly trimmed hedges that bordered our property. This sanctuary, our home. It had nearly been torn from our grasp by the very person who should have cherished it most. Greta's absence hung like a specter, her manipulations and betrayals casting a long shadow over the hard-won peace we had finally achieved. But in the end, her greed and selfishness had been her undoing, driving her from our lives in a blaze of bitter recriminations. "You okay?" Robert's voice, soft and concerned, drew me from my reverie. I mustered a smile, reaching out to give his hand a reassuring squeeze. "I'm fine. Just thinking about how far we've come." His expression sobered and he nodded slowly. "It hasn't been easy, has it? But we made it through together." Emma set down her empty glass, her brow furrowing as she studied our somber expressions. "Are you talking about Greta again?" The question, posed with the guileless candor of youth, struck a chord deep within me. So much had been sacrificed, so many battles waged, all to protect this remarkable young woman from the toxic influence of my former mother-in-law. "Yes," I said simply, holding her gaze. "But that's all in the past now. Greta made her choices, and we made ours, to stand together as a family, no matter what." Emma's features softened, and she inched closer, resting her head on my shoulder in a rare display of affection. "I'm glad you did. I don't know where I'd be without you guys." A lump formed in my throat as I wrapped an arm around her slender frame, drawing her close. Robert reached out, his calloused palm cradling my cheek as he leaned in to press a tender kiss to my forehead. In that moment, surrounded by the vibrant blooms and the ones I loved most, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them united. A family bound not by blood, but by an unbreakable bond forged in the fires of adversity. We had won our battle against Greta's toxic influence, emerging battered but unbroken. And as I looked into the hopeful faces of my husband and daughter, I silently vowed that nothing would ever threaten the sanctuary we had created, the home we had fought so fiercely to preserve. This was our new beginning, our chance to heal and grow, and I intended to nurture it with the same fierce devotion I had shown in defending it from those who sought to destroy us. "Edith, I can't believe you did this." My mother-in-law's voice was sharp, her face a mask of disbelief. I stood there, clutching the letter that revealed Mark's secret life. My world shattered in that instant. "What is the meaning of this?" Gloria demanded, snatching the letter from my trembling hands. Before I could respond, Mark stormed into the room, his expression thunderous. "What's going on here?" I swallowed hard, my throat constricting with a mix of anger and heartbreak. "How long have you known?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Mark's eyes narrowed. "None of your business, Edith," he retorted, turning away. Gloria thrust the letter at him. "Explain this, Mark. Your wife has uncovered your little secret." Mark's jaw tightened as he scanned the contents. "It's not what you think," he muttered, refusing to meet my gaze. "Not what I think," I echoed, my voice rising. "This letter details your affair with Michelle, a woman half my age." "Watch your tone, Edith," Gloria snapped. "This is a family matter." I whirled on her, my composure cracking. "A family matter? While your son was gallivanting around with his mistress, I was here, holding everything together," Mark scoffed. "Don't act so innocent. You've been a cold, distant wife for years. Because you've been emotionally absent." I shot back. Late nights, unexplained absences. It all makes sense now. Gloria stepped between us, her eyes flashing. "Enough of this nonsense. We will not let this ruin our family's reputation." I stared at her, incredulous. "Reputation? Your son has been carrying on an affair, and you're worried about reputation?" "You've always been a poor excuse for a wife," Gloria sniped. No wonder Mark strayed. "Yet I'm the one holding this family together," I replied calmly, my anger hardening into resolve. Mark laughed bitterly. "Is that what you think? You're delusional, Edith." I met his gaze, unflinching. "No, Mark. I'm finally seeing clearly, and I'm done living a lie. Gloria's eyes narrowed. You wouldn't dare leave this family. I straightened my shoulders, a newfound strength surging through me. Watch me. Turning on my heel, I strode out of the room, leaving my shattered marriage behind. It was time to start living for myself and my son, Peter. No more lies, no more toxic relationships. A new chapter was beginning, and I was ready to embrace it, come what may. As I lay in bed that night, the weight of Mark's betrayal pressed down on me like a suffocating blanket. Memories of our once happy marriage flickered through my mind, taunting me with what could have been. How did we reach this point? I thought bitterly. The signs had been there all along. The late nights, the unexplained absences, the growing emotional distance. But I had chosen to turn a blind eye, desperate to preserve the illusion of a perfect family. Gloria's words echoed in my head, each one a dagger to my heart. You've always been a poor excuse for a wife. No wonder Mark strayed. Tears stung my eyes as I recalled the countless sacrifices I had made for this family, putting my own dreams and aspirations aside to be the dutiful wife and mother. And what did I have to show for it? A cheating husband and a manipulative mother-in-law who delighted in twisting the knife deeper. A soft knock on the door jolted me from my thoughts. Mom? Peter's voice was tentative, laced with concern. I hastily wiped my eyes and cleared my throat. Come in, sweetheart. Peter slipped into the room, his brow furrowed. Are you okay? I heard shouting earlier. Mustering a brave smile, I patted the bed beside me. It's nothing for you to worry about, honey. Just some grown-up issues. He settled next to me, his eyes searching mine. Is it about Dad? I know things haven't been great between you two lately. I sighed, my heart aching at the thought of shattering his innocence. Your father and I are going through a difficult time. Yes, but we'll figure it out one way or another. Peter nodded solemnly. I just want us to be a family again, like we used to be. His words pierced my soul. How could I tell him that the family he knew was already gone, torn apart by Mark's selfish actions? I pulled him into a tight embrace, blinking back fresh tears. I love you, Peter, I whispered fiercely. No matter what happens, remember that. He hugged me back, his skinny arms wrapping around me with a strength that belied his age. I love you too, Mom. We'll get through this together. As I held my son close, a newfound determination surged within me. I would not let Mark's betrayal define us. I would not allow Gloria's toxic influence to poison our lives any longer. It was time to take control, to forge a new path, one where Peter and I could find true happiness, free from the shackles of a broken marriage and toxic family dynamics. The road ahead would be difficult, but with my son by my side, I knew I had the strength to face whatever challenges lay ahead. This was just the beginning of our journey towards healing and redemption. And I would stop at nothing to ensure that Peter and I emerged from this storm stronger and more resilient than ever before. The next morning, I steeled myself for another confrontation with Mark. As I entered the kitchen, he was already there, sipping coffee and reading the newspaper as if nothing had happened. We need to talk, I said, my voice firm. Mark glanced up, his expression bored. About what, Edith? I clenched my fists, fighting the urge to hurl the nearest object at his smug face. About your little secret, the affair you've been carrying on behind my back. He snorted derisively. So you found out. Big deal. It's not like we've had a real marriage for years. My jaw dropped at his callous words. How can you say that? I've devoted my life to this family, to being a good wife and mother. And a lousy job you've done, Gloria chimed in, sweeping into the room. If you had been a better wife, Mark wouldn't have strayed. I rounded on her, my temper flaring. Stay out of this, Gloria. This is between me and your son. Like hell it is, she snapped. This involves my family, and I won't let you ruin it with your dramatics. Mark set down his coffee mug, his eyes narrowing. Enough of this. I'm leaving for a week, Edith. Try not to mess things up while I'm gone. I stared at him, incredulous. You're leaving? Just like that? He shrugged, already gathering his things. I need a break from all this nonsense. Don't wait up. As he brushed past me, I felt a surge of anger and despair. How could he be so callous, so dismissive of our marriage, our family? And yet, a part of me couldn't help but feel relieved at the prospect of a temporary reprieve from his toxic presence. Gloria fixed me with a steely glare. You'd better not do anything rash while he's gone, Edith. This family has a reputation to uphold. I met her gaze, my resolve hardening. Don't worry, Gloria. I can manage without him just fine. As Mark's car pulled out of the driveway, I felt a strange sense of liberation. For the first time in years, I wouldn't have to walk on eggshells, constantly trying to appease his whims and Gloria's demands. Peter emerged from his room, his brow furrowed. Is Dad really leaving? I pulled him into a reassuring hug. It's just for a week, honey. We'll be okay. His arms tightened around me. I don't like it when you two fight. My heart clenched at the sadness in his voice. I know, sweetheart, but sometimes grown-ups have to work through their problems in their own way. As I held my son close, I silently vowed to protect him from the toxic environment that had consumed our family for far too long. This week would be a chance for us to breathe, to remember what it felt like to live without the constant weight of Mark's emotional absence and Gloria's manipulative interference. And who knows? Maybe, just maybe, this temporary separation would be the catalyst for something more permanent. A chance for me to finally break free and build the life Peter and I deserved, far away from the toxicity that had plagued us for so long. The first few days of Mark's absence were a welcome reprieve, but my relief was short-lived. On the third day, Peter came down with a high fever, and my world was thrown into chaos once again. It's a fever, Mom, but he's burning up. I don't know what to do. I sobbed into the phone, cradling my ailing son in my arms. We're on our way, darling. Hang in there. My mother's soothing voice came through the line. I tried my best to keep Peter comfortable, but his condition only seemed to worsen. Gloria hovered nearby, her disapproving glares piercing through me like daggers. This is what happens when you don't have a proper man around the house, she sniffed, her words dripping with disdain. I bit back a retort, too exhausted and worried to engage in her toxic games. All that mattered was getting Peter the help he needed. When my parents finally arrived, my mother swooped in like a guardian angel, taking charge of the situation with a calm efficiency that I envied. Let me take a look at him, sweetheart, she murmured, gently brushing Peter's sweat-soaked hair from his forehead. My father pulled me into a comforting embrace, his eyes filled with concern. How are you holding up, Edith? I shook my head, fighting back tears. I'm at my wit's end, Dad. Mark's gone, and Gloria's been no help at all. I don't know what to do. Gloria scoffed from the corner. If you had been a better wife, none of this would be happening. My father's eyes flashed with anger. That's enough, Gloria. Can't you see my daughter is struggling? Where's your compassion? Compassion? Gloria sneered. She brought this upon herself by driving Mark away. I flinched as if struck, her words cutting deeper than any physical blow. Was she right? Had my confrontation with Mark about his affair pushed him to abandon us in our time of need? My mother's voice cut through the tension, her tone firm but gentle. Edith, why don't you come and sit with Peter for a while? I'll make us all some tea. Grateful for the reprieve, I settled beside my son's bed, gently stroking his flushed cheek. His eyes fluttered open, and he managed a weak smile. Mom, I'm sorry for causing so much trouble, he whispered. My heart broke at his words. Oh, honey, you have nothing to be sorry for. I'm the one who's sorry for letting things get so out of hand. Peter's brow furrowed. Is it because of Dad? I know you two haven't been getting along. I swallowed hard, unsure of how much to reveal. Your father and I are going through some difficult times, yes. But that's not your fault, sweetheart. You're the one thing in my life that brings me joy. His small hand found mine, and he gave it a gentle squeeze. I love you, Mom. We'll get through this together. In that moment, my son's unwavering love and strength filled me with a renewed sense of purpose. No matter what obstacles lay ahead, I would fight tooth and nail to protect him from the toxicity that had plagued our family for far too long. As my mother returned with a tray of steaming tea, I met her gaze with a newfound determination. With her and my father's support, I knew I had the strength to weather any storm, even one as tempestuous as the one brewing between Mark, Gloria, and me. Just when I thought the storm had passed, the phone rang, shattering the fragile peace we had found. My heart raced as I answered, bracing myself for more bad news. Edith, there's been an accident. You need to come to the hospital, the voice on the other end urged. My blood ran cold. What happened? Is it Peter? No, it's Mark. He was in a car accident. Relief and anger flooded through me in equal measure. Relief that my son was safe, but anger that Mark's recklessness had once again disrupted our lives. "What happened?" I asked, my voice trembling. There was a pause, and then the caller spoke the words that would change everything. Mark was with another woman. The world seemed to spin as the weight of those words sank in. His affair, the secret he had so carefully guarded, was now exposed for all to see. I felt a twisted sense of vindication, knowing that his lies had finally caught up with him. "I'll be right there," I managed, hanging up the phone. My parents exchanged worried glances, sensing the shift in my demeanor. "Edith, what's going on?" my mother asked gently. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "Mark was in an accident. He was with his mistress." Gloria's face drained of color, her usual haughty expression replaced by one of shock and dismay. For once she was speechless, my father's brow furrowed. "Are you all right, sweetheart? Do you want us to come with you?" I shook my head, a newfound determination surging through me. "No, Dad. This is something I need to handle on my own." As I made my way to the hospital, a strange sense of calm washed over me. The secrets, the lies, the betrayal. It was all out in the open now. Mark had no more cards to play, no more excuses to hide behind. When I arrived at his room, the sight of him lying there, battered and vulnerable, should have filled me with pity. Instead, I felt a twisted sense of satisfaction, knowing that he was finally facing the consequences of his actions. "Edith," he croaked, his eyes widening as I approached his bedside. "Don't bother, Mark," I said, holding up a hand to silence him. "I know everything. Your little secret is out." He flinched, his gaze dropping in shame. For once he had no snide remarks, no dismissive comments to deflect the truth. "So, what now?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. "Now, we face the reality of our situation. No more lies, no more secrets. It's time to decide what we really want." Mark's eyes met mine, a flicker of defiance still burning within them. "And what if I don't want to let you go?" I held his gaze, my resolve unwavering. "That's not your decision to make anymore, Mark. You lost that right the moment you betrayed our marriage." As the weight of my words settled over him, I felt a sense of power, a newfound strength that had been buried for far too long. The tables had turned, and for once, I was the one in control. This was just the beginning of a new chapter, one where I would no longer be a victim of Mark's selfish actions or Gloria's toxic manipulations. It was time to take back my life, to fight for the happiness and peace that had eluded me for far too long. And as I looked into Mark's defeated eyes, I knew that this time I would emerge victorious, no matter the cost. The hospital room was thick with tension as I faced Mark, his battered form a stark reminder of the consequences of his actions. For once he seemed subdued, unable to deflect the harsh reality that had come crashing down upon us. "So, this is it, Mark," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil raging within me. "We're done." I held out the divorce papers, the weight of their implications heavy in my hands. This was the moment I had both dreaded and longed for, the chance to finally sever the toxic ties that had bound us for far too long. Mark's eyes widened, a flicker of defiance still burning within them. "You wouldn't dare," he growled, his words laced with a familiar arrogance. I met his gaze, unflinching. "Watch me." As he stared at the papers, his bravado seemed to falter, replaced by a rare glimpse of vulnerability. For a fleeting moment, I almost felt pity for him. Almost. "After everything we've been through, you're just going to throw it all away?" he asked, his voice tinged with desperation. I couldn't help but laugh, a bitter sound that echoed through the sterile room. "Everything we've been through? You mean the years of emotional neglect, the constant disrespect, the lies and betrayal?" Mark flinched, his eyes dropping to the stark white sheets that covered his battered form. "You did this, Mark," I continued, the words tumbling out in a torrent of pent-up frustration. "You destroyed our marriage with your selfish actions, your complete disregard for our family." His jaw clenched, but he remained silent, unable to deflect the truth that hung heavy in the air between us. "I gave you everything," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I put my dreams aside, sacrificed my own happiness, all for the sake of our family. And how did you repay me? By carrying on an affair with a woman half my age, flaunting your infidelity for the world to see." Mark opened his mouth, but I held up a hand, cutting him off. "Don't bother making excuses, Mark. It's too late for that. The damage is done, and there's no going back." I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. Sign the papers, Mark. It's over. His eyes met mine, a flicker of defiance still burning within their depths. And if I refuse? I couldn't help but laugh, a bitter sound that echoed through the sterile room. Then you'll be left with nothing. No wife, no family, no reputation. Just the consequences of your own selfish actions. As the weight of my words settled over him, I could see the fight draining from his eyes, replaced by a weary resignation. Fine, he muttered, reaching for the pen beside his bed. Have it your way, Edith. With a shaky hand, he scrawled his signature across the papers, sealing our fate with a few strokes of ink. As I gathered the documents, a sense of finality washed over me. It was done. The chapter of my life that had been defined by Mark's toxic presence was finally closed. I hope it was worth it, Mark, I said, my voice laced with a mixture of sadness and triumph. Because from this moment on, you're on your own. Turning on my heel, I strode out of the room, leaving him to grapple with the wreckage of our shattered marriage. A weight had been lifted from my shoulders, and for the first time in years, I felt truly free. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but I was ready to face it head-on, armed with a newfound sense of strength and resilience. Mark's betrayal had been a harsh lesson, but it had also been a catalyst for change, a chance to break free from the toxic cycle that had consumed our lives for far too long. As I stepped out into the crisp morning air, I took a deep breath, savoring the taste of freedom. This was the beginning of a new chapter, one where I would write my own story, free from the shackles of a loveless marriage and the toxic influence of those who sought to control me. And as the sun rose over the horizon, I couldn't help but feel a sense of hope and possibility, a promise of better days to come, where I would finally be the master of my own destiny. As I strode out of Mark's hospital room, the weight of our shattered marriage finally lifted from my shoulders. I was met with a familiar, unwelcome sight. Gloria, her face contorted in a mask of fury. "What have you done, Edith?" she hissed, her eyes boring into me like daggers. I squared my shoulders, refusing to be intimidated. "What needed to be done, Gloria? Mark and I are through." Her nostrils flared, and she took a step closer, her presence looming over me like a dark cloud. "You will not ruin this family, Edith. Not after everything we've built." I couldn't help but laugh, a bitter sound that echoed through the sterile hallway. "The family was already ruined, Gloria, and I won't be part of it anymore." Her eyes narrowed, and for a moment I thought she might strike me. "So you're just going to abandon your husband in his time of need? After all he's done for you?" I shook my head, my resolve unwavering. "Don't try to twist this, Gloria. Mark brought this upon himself with his selfish actions. He's the one who betrayed our vows, our family." Gloria's lips curled into a sneer. "And you think you're blameless in all this? If you had been a better wife, a more attentive partner, he wouldn't have strayed." Her words stung, but I refused to let them pierce my newfound armor. "That's a convenient excuse, Gloria, but we both know the truth." Her brow furrowed, and she took a step closer, her voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "What truth?" I met her gaze, unflinching. "That you knew about Mark's affair all along, that you helped him cover it up just to preserve your precious family image." Gloria's face drained of color, and for a moment she seemed at a loss for words. Then her eyes narrowed and she regained her composure. "So what if I did?" she spat. "I was protecting our family, something you clearly have no concept of." I shook my head, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. "You were protecting your own selfish interests, Gloria, just like Mark, and I'm done being a pawn in your twisted games." Her jaw clenched, and I could see the fury simmering just beneath the surface. "You ungrateful little wretch. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. "You've done nothing for me, Gloria. All you've ever done is tear me down, make me feel small and insignificant. Well, no more." Her eyes widened, and she took a step back, as if struck by my words. "I'm taking my life back, Gloria," I continued, my voice steady and unwavering, "and you and Mark can no longer stand in my way." For a moment we stood there, locked in a silent battle of wills, the tension crackling between us like electricity. Then Gloria's shoulders slumped, and I saw a flicker of something I never thought I'd see in her eyes: defeat. "Fine," she muttered, her voice laced with venom. "Have it your way, Edith. but don't come crawling back when you realize the mistake you've made." With that, she turned on her heel and stormed away, leaving me standing in the hallway, my heart pounding in my chest. As the adrenaline coursed through my veins, I couldn't help but feel a sense of triumph. For years, Gloria had held me in her iron grip, using her manipulative tactics to control every aspect of my life. But not anymore. I was free, truly free, for the first time in as long as I could remember. And as I turned to leave the hospital, a newfound sense of purpose propelled me forward. This was just the beginning of a new chapter, one where I would write my own story, free from the toxic influence of those who sought to control me. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but I was ready to face it head-on, armed with a strength and resilience that had been forged in the fires of adversity. As I stepped out into the warm embrace of the sun, I couldn't help but smile. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, it was mine to shape, to mold into something beautiful and fulfilling. And as I made my way home to the son who had been my unwavering source of strength and inspiration, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together. A united front, bound by a love that could never be broken, even by the most toxic of influences. The weight of the past few weeks seemed to lift from my shoulders as I stepped through the front door, greeted by the familiar warmth of home. Peter rushed to embrace me, his eyes shining with a mixture of relief and concern. "Mom, you're back. Is everything okay?" I pulled him close, savoring the moment. "Everything's going to be just fine, sweetheart. Better than fine." He pulled back, his brow furrowed. "What do you mean? What happened with Dad?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the conversation ahead. "Peter, your father and we're separating." His eyes widened, and I could see the questions forming on his lips. "I know this is a lot to take in," I continued, guiding him to the couch. "But it's for the best, believe me." Peter nodded slowly, his gaze fixed on me with an intensity that belied his age. "Is it because of the fighting and his other woman?" I felt a pang of sadness that my son had been exposed to such ugliness, but I knew it was better to be honest with him. "Yes, honey, your father made some choices that hurt our family deeply, and as much as I love him, I can't stay in a relationship like that anymore." Peter's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "But what about us? Are we still a family?" I pulled him into a fierce embrace, my heart swelling with love for this remarkable boy. "Of course we are, Peter. You and I will always be a family, no matter what happens. And this time, it'll be a family built on love, respect, and honesty." He nodded against my shoulder, and I could feel the tension slowly leaving his body. "I'm sorry you had to go through all this, sweetheart," I murmured, stroking his hair. "But I promise, better days are ahead." As we sat there, holding each other close, I felt a sense of peace wash over me, a calm certainty that I was finally on the right path. The road ahead would be challenging, but with Peter by my side, I knew we could weather any storm. In the days and weeks that followed, we settled into a new routine, one free from the toxic influence of Mark and Gloria. I reconnected with old friends, finding solace and support in their unwavering companionship. And slowly but surely, the wounds of the past began to heal. One sunny afternoon, as Peter and I strolled through the park, hand in hand, he turned to me with a smile that warmed my heart. "Mommy, can we visit Grandpa and Grandma tomorrow?" I couldn't help but grin, filled with gratitude for the loving family that had stood by us through it all. "Of course, darling. We're free to do whatever we want now." As we continued our walk, surrounded by the laughter of children and the gentle rustling of leaves, I felt a sense of contentment wash over me. This was the life I had dreamed of, a life filled with love, laughter, and the freedom to forge our own path. No longer would we be shackled by the toxic bonds of a broken marriage or the manipulative whims of those who sought to control us. We were free, truly free, to embrace the future on our own terms. And as I looked into Peter's eyes, shining with hope and possibility, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together, a united front, bound by a love that could never be broken, even by the most toxic of influences. This was the beginning of our new chapter, one filled with endless possibilities and the promise of a brighter tomorrow. And as we walked hand in hand into the future, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and gratitude for the resilience that had carried us through the darkest of storms. We had emerged from the ashes of our past, stronger and more resilient than ever before. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink, I knew that our journey had only just begun. A journey towards healing, happiness, and the reclamation of our lives on our own terms.